horror fans, Pete here from the Lassercast. I'm super excited to make a top 10 list for the horror books of 2022. The next few videos are going to be of me interviewing the authors of some of these books, including today's video, which is for the Dead Friends Society, written by Paul Gandersman and Peter Hall. So sit back and relax and check out this video for this book that I consider one of my favorites for 2022.
Tonight we have two special guests. This is my first time talking with two authors at the same time. We have Peter Hall and Paul Gandersman. They are the authors of Dead Friends Society, and that just came out from Encyclopocalypse Publications. Guys, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
So Peter and Paul both have experience in the film industry, and we're going to dive into that too. There's a whole lot to unpack today, but I wanted to ask you guys this question right up front. So at the very beginning of the book, in the acknowledgments, you guys talk about how Dead Friends Society was originally going to be a film, and basically like COVID messed that up. I was wondering, how far were you into the production of Dead Friends Society before COVID hit?
Go for it, Peter.
So we production-wise, we were not close. Like, it wasn't like a green light where it was about to shoot the next day and then we shut down kind of thing. We were sort of done with active development. The script had gone through many rewrites. Like, we were going out to people. We were getting progress in various ways. Like, it was progressing, is what I should say. And then COVID happened, and it became very obvious that we were not going to make any movie anytime soon, kind of thing. And so it just made sense to try to do something else that we could do without having to go out into the world. And so we rolled the dice and we're like, hey, what if we did it as a book? Not knowing if we could do it as a book or not.
Yeah, I think we were discussing numerous ideas of what to be doing with our time, because Peter and I like to be working on something. And yeah, like you said, we didn't know what to expect in terms of when we were going to be able to be making any kind of film of any kind anytime soon. So we like the idea. Like, we kicked around, like, should we do a fictional podcast, like audio drama thing? Should we do a graphic novel? But neither of us know how to draw. But we landed on, we wanted to do something where the finished product would be something that we could wholesale create. The written word would be the finished product. So we decided we wanted to try a novel, and I think it just made sense. We had a 100-page screenplay sitting right there with a story that we loved, and we're like, let's just try and take it like a chapter at a time and see how it goes. And the plus side would be like, hey, if it does come out, we're kind of taking indie filmmaking to the next level, where we're generating our own IP,
right?
And so maybe it can come back full circle one day.
Well, one of the people that you mentioned in the acknowledgments has a lot of experience with both novels and screenwriting as well, C. Robert Cargill. And you said that he was the one that convinced you guys to take the book out of the drawer, right? I think that's what it said, to take the book out of the drawer. So what was that conversation like, and what did he recommend?
Yeah, so he's been a longtime friend of both of us. I've lived in Austin, I think 15 years and change. And I met Cargill pretty early on through the film community here. And we kind of went to him because we had no idea what to expect, what the publishing world was. That was a thing we figured out, like, after we finished the book or finished the draft of the book. We were like, what do we do with this? And everyone we knew was just film industry people. And so we had this opportunity with Encyclopocalypse, who are amazing, but at that moment, we didn't know how to interpret this. And so we hit him up and talked to him and just asked for his advice. And, the best advice that he gave us was just that, like, Peter and I basically have, we put out projects here and there, and we've produced feature films for other people, like Emily Hagen's, who's amazing, and we love what we've been able to do with her. But our own projects, like, we've kind of just we've been in a circle of development forever. And Cargill was like, the best thing you guys can do is just get your own original work out there. And so that was kind of the advice we needed to hear.
Well, speaking of things that you've produced, I know that you guys were involved in the cold open segment of Scare Package. And Danny, who's my co-host, and just a little give you background information. Danny often is not involved when we interview authors because I'm the one that actually reads the books. He watches the movies, right? But we're both big fans of Scare Package. I know you guys were involved with the Cold Open segment. You were the producers of that segment. But Paul, you edited that segment as well, right?
I co-edited it, yeah.
Co-edited it. So I've actually never spoken to a film editor before. But I was just wondering, when it comes to the actual editing of a movie, especially a horror movie, are there things that you're taught where, specific rules that you would adhere to make a scene scary? Like, you linger on a certain shot, or, like how long should a certain shot be? Are there rules like that?
I don't know that there are rules. It's really just a feeling. It's just when you're in the editing room working on a thing, and especially in Cold Open, right? There's horror and comedy,
right,
and the balance. And I think comedy especially is really difficult to edit because you have to bake in timing for laughs and that sort of thing, and then you're just in a room with like two people, so you're like, I think people would be laughing here,
right.
But I don't know. But yeah, it's really just feeling, and like over time with experience, you just kind of start to feel out where that is, and then you show it to other people and see, like, you're just watching other people watch it and see like the ups and downs of it. It's like, that's why you hear about like test screenings for movies and stuff like that. That's where what they're trying to figure that sort of thing out, like tune the knobs of the roller coaster so that way it's working at maximum effect. Sorry, I don't have a better answer, but yeah, I mean, some people out there might think there's rules to it.
Yeah,
but I just think it's whatever feels right. I don't know, Peter, do you I know you don't press the buttons yourself, but you've of course been involved in the process.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm sure that someone out there will be like, well, here's the hard and fast rules about editing.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. But you shouldn't listen to anybody who is ever giving advice. They're like, here are the absolute rules that you have to follow when writing a screenplay or directing a movie or editing. Like, you do what works and what works for that project. So like for something like Scare Package, as Paul was saying, like it is a comedic thing. So the scares in a way are almost, they're not spoofs, but it's sort of taking an expected language of how scares work and injecting comedy into them. We didn't write Scare Package obviously, but I think one thing that we like to do when we're writing screen projects is thinking of the edit while writing, of knowing how to get in and out of a scene and what the likely transition is going to be. And that's something that Emily certainly thinks about as well. So I'm sure that she had a pretty good idea of what the edit was going to look like before we even shot anything.
We have a screenplay that we've been working on for a while. That's kind of a low budget film that fingers crossed we'll be making next year. That's a fake horror documentary. Mm-hmm. And not a mockumentary, not a found footage movie, but written as a documentary. And that's been the most complicated thing we've ever written because we literally wrote for the edit. Because the main character of the film is the documentarian, like making this film. And so we did a whole draft and we realized like, this is just the events that happened, but this is not how the documentarian would put together the documentary of it, right? You might put a flash to this part up front and then return to it and how you introduce the characters. And so we had to rewrite it from scratch, kind of treating the events that happened as this is the truth. And now how do you put that together? And so talking about writing for the edit, we literally did that. We spent about a year doing that. It was very complicated.
Yeah, it's a lot harder than you would think to write a fake documentary that is authentically a documentary that is in the style that you would expect. Because as Paul said, we came up with the story and the characters and everything, but as we were writing it, like we were writing the sort of just traditional events, and then I was like, but how would you actually edit this footage that they're getting in these moments? Like, how would a documentarian a year later cut all this together, and what kind of extra material would they need and use, and fictionalizing all of that was pretty damn hard.
Wow. Yeah, I can only imagine. We've had David Weiner on our channel a couple of times. He's the director of In Search of Darkness, like all those documentaries. Mm-hmm. And, he's always talking about editing and stuff with us. And I know that process, he's gone into length about it with us. And it's very interesting to me. But he's the director, he's not the editor. But what I was going to say was that this movie that you're working on, this next project, are you sort of inspired by like This Is Spinal Tap and Best in Show, like that kind of?
No, I mean it's interesting because there's the label mockumentary, like because it has the word mock in it, everyone kind of assumes that it's automatically going to be comedic. But this is much. It is serious. It is scary. I mean, there's comedic stuff in it because Paul and I have pretty decent senses of humor, but it's closer to. There's also actually not a lot of horror faux documentaries. It's kind of closer to something like Lake Mungo. I don't know if you've seen Lake Mungo.
I have not, but I heard about it recently. I know that it was on that 101 scariest horror movie lists.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Lake Mungo's great. This is a bit more. I'm trying to think of something to compare it to. The reboot on Netflix of Unsolved Mystery. Some of their episodes are really good, and this is not far off of that. I don't know. It's a really interesting project. It is the most complicated thing that Paul and I have ever conceived and written, and the response to the people who have read it has been very, very, very enthusiastic. So hopefully we do actually make it next year. If we do, we'll come back and talk about it. But it'll be really, really cool.
Yeah, please do. And Danny will actually come on too, because it'll be a movie, right? So yeah. Well, speaking of your film projects, I know that you guys both co-wrote and co-directed No Signal. Now, I haven't seen No Signal, but I saw it on your IMDb page, right? And the description says it's a new twist on the call is coming from inside the house, an urban legend that showcases how technology can get in the way of good old-fashioned murder. So that sounds like fun to me. That's a fun kind of tagline. What's the premise behind that one?
Well, you can watch it in 30 seconds, literally.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Are you familiar with the film festival Fantasticfest?
Of course, yeah.
I've
never been.
But...
But...
It was
Yeah.
okay. They do a bumper competition. You make a 30-second short film that plays before the films, and so we made that in 2019, and we won that. So it's interesting. Like Peter and I have been working together like a decade as producers, and then Peter was writing and I was directing. And the longer we worked together, we kind of figured out we wanted to be doing both things together. So that's actually the only one we've co-directed is a 30-second short, but it went really well. So
yeah, it went well. I mean, the sort of assembly cut of it, like it was a short film. Like it's, when we first cut it all together, it was like 4 minutes long, 5 minutes long, or something like that. And I was like, this has to be under 60 seconds. Like there is an actual
30.
Well, I guess it was 30, and then we kept cutting it down and down, and so it is a micro short film. But we treated it like a proper short film. We
put it on IMDb.
But
yeah. My mind is going completely blank. Who's the director of Wolf of Snow Hollow?
Jim
Cummings. Jim Cummings. So I think I did actually go to a Fantasticfest screening of his movie, the Beta Test. Beta Test. Thank you. Yeah, and I think that had like a bumper in front of it as well, and it was one where like a wolf put on a guise. Like he pretended to be a human by putting on skin. Have you guys seen that one?
I don't remember that one. No.
Probably. Okay. I've been going to Fantasticfest since 2007, so I've probably seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen hundreds of them.
Well, I know. Like I saw that you guys won the best bumper competition for 2019. So I didn't realize that the bumper was like that short film before the movie. And so then it said that it played before Jojo Rabbit and like Knives Out. Like, what did that feel like?
That was cool.
Yeah.
That was cool.
That was very cool.
We didn't know that was going to happen. It just kind of worked out that way. Because if I remember the order of events right, it just played like, because all of the people who submit bumpers, not all of them play, but the fest selects, 30 of them or whatever to play. I had no idea how they were going to sign which ones play in front of which film. So we got the opening night one. And then because we won the award, then they played it in front of the closing night film. And so that's how it ended up in front of those two.
That is awesome.
Which was, very cool.
Fun.
Yeah. And so, we won
it's
the award.
only 30 seconds.
That was the last year. That was the last year that Fantasticfest did it. They haven't done it since, so we're the reigning champions.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, like, what's it like working together on a novel versus working together on a screenplay?
It was hard.
Pretty similar.
But
I
yeah,
think
but
it's
not
similar.
that dissimilar. Like it's the difficulty of it was transitioning from writing a script to a novel, just because they are so different. Scripts are all about being concise and short, and you're not spending a lot of time in this sort of like narrative headspace of feelings and describing like flashback memories and things like that. Whereas in prose, you have that, it's expected. So like padding that
It's
stuff
required.
out.
You have to paint the whole picture on the page because that's all there is.
Yeah.
Right.
So learning how to flex that muscle was the biggest change. But our process was actually pretty similar to how we do scripts, which is that one of us will write a chunk of pages and then send it to the other person. And so if I send Paul 10 pages, he's then going through and he's making edits and suggestions and changes to what I've done. And then he does a few more pages. And then the next day I go over his notes to me, and then I move it slightly farther down the line. So like we're constantly going over each other's work as we're writing.
We're very heavy outliners. We know where the story's going. Like there'll be sections where we're like, this kind of thing happens, and then one of us will surprise the other and that sort of thing. So there's definitely room for, taking it new directions. But we're Stephen King is known for like, I just let the book take me where it's going to take me, and that works for him. But like Peter and I are like, we can't start writing page 1 until we know what the last page is, like what's going to happen. And so we kind of outline. Well, and when you're adapting a screenplay, we had 100-page outline, which kind of, I don't want to say it made it easy, but it definitely gave us we were able to start on page 1 pretty quickly.
You went right to the question I was going to ask, which was, are you guys like planners or pantsers, or is like one of you like that and one of you is not? Sounds like you guys together as a team are planners. I was going to say, though, one thing I didn't write down, but I was just kind of curious, it kind of came up. Since you're like emailing each other back and forth, how much are you interacting when you are writing a screenplay or when you turn this into a novel? Like, are you just emailing each other every day and it's like hours worth of interaction, or what's that like?
Well, so we've set up we have our own Slack. And so we'll message each other. I tend to write during the day and Paul tends to work at night. And so one of the things that we do a lot, and this is just kind of like a quirk, is like if I'm stuck on something or have an idea, like on Slack, I'll just start talking kind of out loud. Like Paul might not even be there. Like I'll just be typing to myself like, well, what about this? Does this idea make sense? And then I sort of flesh those out and I kind of like have a conversation with myself in a lot of ways. And then Paul will jump in and be like, oh, well, I think points A, B, and C make sense, but what about also X, Y, and Z? And so there is a lot of, particularly when we're coming up with ideas, there's a lot of back and forth in that regard. I don't know. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, well, no, I agree. That's what happens. And another thing that works well is, like a lot of writers will give very good advice that like, if you're getting stopped up on something, just move past it. Right. And it works great being a writing team, because I'll literally, if I'm getting blocked on a thing, I'll just put in bold letters like, then this happens. I don't know how to make it happen. Peter, can you figure this out? And then I move past it. And then either Peter figured it out, or if neither of us can figure it out, that kind of tells us, oh, this is the wrong thing, or this character or whatever. And it's kind of a great way. We are able to more quickly realize the root cause of a problem. It's either like one of us is able to figure it out, or if neither, then there's a bigger issue there and we need to rewrite it.
And we use so for example, when we're writing a script, we use software called Fade In, and we use the note system in that pretty extensively. So what we'll do is we'll leave notes to each other in the thing itself, like Paul said, like I know that this section maybe isn't there yet. Like we need to come back and do this. And we kind of leave those notes there and don't clear them away until they're resolved. And we did a similar thing with writing the book as well. Cause we wrote it, which learning next time we won't do it this way, but we wrote the whole thing like in Google Documents. and just like left.
Don't do
notes
that.
on the side
Don't
of
do
it.
that.
Yeah. It gets once you're reaching 400 pages, it gets real unwieldy on
Oh my
Google
God.
documents.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the book, I know that it's published by Encyclopocalypse, and I kind of have an experience working with Encyclopocalypse. They always kind of recommend authors to me, right? And they told me about Tom Holland, the guy who directed Fright Night and Child's Play, right? He has Fright Night Origins, which just came out, right? Now, I read Fright Night Origins before I saw the actual Fright Night movie because I'd never seen
Oh,
the movie,
interesting.
right? And
That's
so
cool.
it was kind of cool seeing the movie because it was like everything was all so fleshed out. Now, Peter, you had mentioned before that writing a screenplay is different because you have to explain so much in the novel versus the screenplay. Like the screenplay, like Paul, you said, is like everything has to be on the page, whereas like with a novel, you're alluding to things and you can go into much more depth. When you're like fleshing out the world of Dead Friends Society, which has its own like specific lore, like in world building, did you find that to be very challenging based as opposed to writing a screenplay? Like, was it hard fleshing things out and elaborating on things?
It I don't know that I would call it hard. It definitely having this sort of freedom to explore things even more in the book is sort of like you kind of have to know when to stop yourself in a lot of ways. Like you could spend hours elaborating on the rules of the afterlife and things like that, but after a while it's kind of like, well, they get the point. Like hopefully the reader gets it at this point. We did one of the sort of bigger changes between going from the screenplay to the book was knowing what we were going to do with the movie. We knew certain limitations. We produce movies. We know how expensive they can get. We know what to do on a budget, what not to do. So like there's aspects of it that we never wrote too big or outlandish in the screenplay because we knew that we weren't going to be able to make it. Like it would make the movie unmakeable at our level kind of thing. Right. And so not having those limitations in the book allowed us to expand certain ideas and themes and sections like a bit more, which I don't know if you've read the book yet or not, but the hollow side they go into, this is not a spoiler or anything, but there's an aspect of the afterlife that is much bigger in the book than it was in the movie. A lot of stuff involving Rose, and then later on in the third act, sort of like there's a time travel is not the right word for it, but there is a sort of time hopping aspect to it that wasn't in the movie. Okay. It was something that we had talked about, but we kind of ruled out because you were like, well, this is getting production design wise, this is getting too complicated. Like we can't do 3 different time periods on our budget kind of thing. But in the book, we didn't have that problem, so we were allowed to do it.
Yeah. And I think also just how much we learned about the characters. Like now, like if we got the opportunity to make the movie, like I think we'd want to go back and rework the script. I mean, I think the core beats are all there, but like we just learned so much about the characters by digging into their memories and their past and what made them themselves. I haven't looked at the screenplay in 2 years. I'd be like, I imagine it's like a skeleton, barely a skeleton of what this is now. And so, just I encourage, I've told screenwriter friends of mine, like how much I love the process of exploring the story in prose as opposed to screenplay, just because again, you learn so much about the characters that is tough to do when you just have to write they wear this and they've got this kind of look on their face. Move on. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Or whatever.
And in our story has such a specific setup to it that it was actually always one of the hardest things about the screenplay is, and for people who don't know, the story of the Dead Friends Society is it kind of opens at the end of a horror movie with the final girl running around her house and finding all of her dead friends. And then she gets killed by a slasher, and then they all wake up in the house as ghosts. And so it starts in the house sort of at the end of a story. And so you meet the characters very, very quickly. And there's, in the movie, there was no time to establish, character histories and things like that right away. Like it opens in action. The first, like, if I'm remembering the timing right, like they die within the first 3 pages of the script.
Oh wow.
It's
Yeah.
very quick.
Yeah.
And so that was actually always one of the biggest challenges, was finding efficient ways to work in character into the screenplay when you are working that quickly. And so having the space of the book of padding out who they are and sort of dealing with flashbacks, or they're not even flashbacks, just a character when you're in a section that's in their point of view, like you can explore their memories, you can explore their feelings about things in a way that we couldn't in the movie.
Yeah.
And like Peter was talking earlier about like how we could go too far in the book version, right? If like we're very much believers in the material is the material, and we're not precious about it, and we're willing to cut anything, right? And so I think for us, we still wanted it to have that momentum and that feeling of being a movie. And honestly, the best thing was when we sent it to Sean Durger at Encyclopocalypse to read it. I don't think he didn't know our backstory with it, and he responded back saying he really dug it and that it felt like reading a movie. And we were like, funny story about this. So that was like, to me, that was like such a huge compliment, because it was like, all right, good. We got like, we were able, even though it's much longer to read, it still has that pacing and that feeling, hopefully, of watching a horror movie, because yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny because we've kind of avoided talking about the actual story of Dead Friends Society. And what I do purposely is I try to avoid spoilers when we do these kind of interviews, because I want people to go out and read your books. I loved your book. And
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. You know, you said that Sean I can never say his last name, Durgar?
I assume it's Sean
Durger.
Durger. Actually, I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sean Durger.
We love you, Sean. We love you, Sean. I don't think I've heard it out loud.
Sean D.
Yeah, and
Sean
it's
D
funny.
and Encyclopocalypse. He's the man.
Because he's an awesome narrator too. I've heard his voice a whole bunch of times, you know, but I can never pronounce his name right. But anyway, he said that you said it was like you know, it reads like a movie, and it absolutely does. And that momentum is so important, because it really does, just like right out the bat, you're just running, you know, through the story, and it just keeps jumping. And I was wondering, could either one of you just kind of quickly pitch the story without spoilers to people that are interested?
Yeah. Do you want me to do it? So the sort of the way that I've described it is that it is a haunted house story from the perspective of the ghosts, and it's also a slasher in which the main characters are the ghosts of the slasher's victims. And so the story is a group of friends who all die at the hands of this mass killer called the Fireman. And they wake up in the house as ghosts. The story starts in the 90s, and they can't leave the house, and eventually a new family moves in, and they realize that the fireman will be coming back to kill the new family, and so they have to figure out how to save her while also not dying again in the afterlife, which they learn is possible.
Yes.
They're kind, in a way, we never say the word, but you can think about it like they're kind of trapped in a purgatory kind of thing, like between the living and the dead, which they learn gives them some ability to kind of bridge the gap. Yeah, I think it's fun. You know, it's not something that I think it's not something that, you know, you've seen in a lot of movies or books. Kind of I hesitate to say rules, but kind of like the world building we do, and the way that the perspective of the ghosts and what they're able to do between these two worlds is, I think, fun. It's a fun world to play in, and Peter and I want to do a lot more in this world.
Yeah. Well, I want to actually talk about that in 1 second, but before we get to that, you said that it's, you know, we haven't seen that often, and I wholeheartedly agree. I don't think we've seen a lot of mainstream movies or even indie movies with this subject matter or told in this kind of fun way, right? However, there are influences that I kind of kept thinking about when I was reading it. I was thinking about Beetlejuice, and I was also thinking there was a show that was on the Sci-Fi Channel, which was originally on the BBC. It was called Being Human, and like Sam Witwer is in the American version. Yeah, and there's a girl on that show who's a ghost, and so there's all these supernatural people living in an apartment or a
Yeah.
house, and it's kind of reminded me of your story. So,
Mm.
were either of those influences on your original screenplay?
Beetlejuice for sure.
Yeah.
One of the sort of the quick elevator pitch I've given to people is that the
Yeah.
story is basically Scream meets Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It was more of it was one of those things that I do remember watching it early on because I was like, what movies are about ghosts where the main characters are ghosts? And the first one that popped to my mind was Beetlejuice. And so that was definitely a watch and sort of learn how they do it. I have seen Being Human. It wasn't an active influence. I've seen the British version. I haven't seen the American version.
Okay.
It wasn't an active influence, but now that you say it, I can certainly see why you would say it. It does have a very similar sort of friends discovering their sort of uniqueness, all trapped, or they're not trapped in that story, but yeah, I definitely can see where you're going with that.
I think with Beetlejuice, we were looking at it because in a story like this, there's again the word, but there's a lot of rules you have to set up and understand. Like, can the ghost do this? Can they do that? And Beetlejuice just does such a pitch perfect job of informing you and the characters of the rules of the world while keeping it exciting and interesting. It's not like anybody's just sitting there. Well, actually, they literally have a handbook, but even they make the handbook fun, right? And so we were I remember we had like early drafts of the screenplay where it was just like pages and pages of people talking and figuring out, oh, well, can we do this and this and that? And it was so boring. And we were like, how do we get through this as quick as possible? And I remember talking about Beetlejuice, and it's like, I just remember the shot of them holding the little horse in front of the mirror, and it's like, okay, I get it. I get that. I get that element of it. So yeah.
It's funny. So my son, who's 11, he asked to read this, and eventually I relented. I was like, "Yeah, I guess you could read it," because it's not written for 11-year-olds for sure. But one of his favorite things about it was the early section when they are ghosts and they're discovering the rules of the afterlife, and sort of figuring out what they are capable of and not capable of and how that works. Like he found that to be really fascinating. So that was a fun little compliment. Because it's something that we obsessed over, but also tried to not obsess over in the writing. I don't know if that makes sense. It's that we were constantly asking ourselves, like, well, in this scenario, what's possible, what's not possible, like establishing the limits. But as Paul was saying, in the screenplay, we learned that like if we spend, that stuff interests us, but if the characters spend 20 pages in a row talking about like, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? Like it got real boring.
Mm-hmm.
So working that discovery into more plot-driven stuff was hard to do, but in the end, I think it worked out really well.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely agree with that. It's funny because there's sort of like the core monsters that we always see, right? We just had Halloween, and it's like you always see the same kind of monsters. Always, you see vampires, you see werewolves, you see like Frankenstein's monster, and then every so often you have like zombies and ghosts. And I feel like for all the other monsters, there's many movie examples of each. There's of course many ghost movies like Hauntings, right? But there's very few movies where it's from the perspective of the ghost character. I mean, obviously you have like Patrick Swayze's Ghost, and then you have Beetlejuice, which we refer to. But it just makes me really excited about this idea of your book as a movie, because I think it'd be very unique. And the book is just a lot of fun, just, for people that have yet to read it, You did mention, Paul, before that you want to kind of expand the universe. And when I was doing a little bit of research, well, you mentioned this in the acknowledgments too, Giver Taker. That was another film that you guys worked on, like a short. You said that movie is connected to this. I haven't seen Give or Taker, so are you able to explain how they're connected without spoiling either?
Sure. Oh yeah. I mean, Give or Taker is like a 10-minute short film. You could just Google or search it on YouTube. It's on there. That also played at Fantasticfest back in 2016, I think. And there's no characters that are going to show up in either one, or no. It's just kind of, it's in this world that, Peter and I really just kind of want to make things in, and kind of, I would say closest comparison, and I'm not comparing us to Stephen King at all, but the closest comparison is kind of like The Dark Tower, how all, if you're familiar with it, like all like, you know, all or many of Stephen King books like will connect back to it. It's like a shared universe and that sort of thing. And so, you know, I think we like the idea of like what we want to write is kind of like tonally similar, and we have different kinds of stories. We're actively brainstorming the next book we want to write right now. And, you know, it's kind of its own standalone story, but there are little opportunities. And I was just talking to Peter about this the other day, and like, well, we can have, what if there's this door in this room and we don't explain this door, but like that can literally be a door that connects to the hollow side sort of thing. And like, you know, so I think it's just what we're hoping to accomplish long term is kind of telling a bunch of stories that connect together. And if the Dead Friends Society is something that really resonates with people, we one day want to write the Return of the Dead Friends Society, and you know, and Revenge of the Dead Friends Society. I don't know, whatever's next. But yeah, so I mean, I think if you watch Give or Taker, the biggest thing you would get is just kind of like like you would see, and you'd be like, oh, okay, this is like young adult, like kind of horror, right? Which is what Peter and I grew up on, like R.L. Stein and Christopher Pike and Scream, and I Know What You Did Last Summer. It was like we're both in our late 30s, and it, you know, that was just what we were watching in our formative years and what really informed our taste. And so I think you know, that's kind of the world we want to play in. But I feel like we've kind of also, it hopefully doesn't feel like a copy of those sorts of things. Like it's kind of like we took all the parts of that we loved, but then kind of are trying to create our own version of that. And whereas like Christopher Pike and R.L. Stein, they were more PG-13, right? Where this is more R and has bad words and a lot more violence and that sort of thing. So we're just kind of, it's a grab bag of all the things we love.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned that you guys are in your late 30s. I'm 40. And so at the very beginning of your book, you know, when we are introduced to the main characters and their house and stuff, there's, you know, all the different things that are in their rooms. And it really kind of gave me that nostalgia for that, you know, time period of, you know, 1998, you know, I was like 16 years old. So I could kind of, you know, I was definitely feeling that. You mentioned the Dark Tower too. And the inside your book, there's artwork as well. And that reminds me of the Dark Tower, just the fact there's artwork in it. But then the like the actual font and stuff that's used in the book reminds me of Stephen King Dark Tower kind of font and the artwork itself. So the artwork itself kind of reminds me of like an 80s paperback. Were you guys going for that approach with the artwork?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So the artwork started as it's an artist named Stephen Andrade, who's really for the interior art is Stephen Andrade, and we had commissioned. He did the poster for Give or Taker, which was an oil painting, I believe, and we commissioned some just pencil sketches for when we were making the pitch deck for the movie. And so we just kind of described some scenes, like a girl looks through her hand to establish that she's a ghost, and like here's the description. We gave him the description of the firemen, and so he gave us a couple sketches early on. Yeah, there's
there you
one.
go.
And
Nice.
and we used those in the pitch deck, and then once we came back around to the book, we approached Stephen to see if he could do the cover for the book, but he was too busy because he was preparing for his solo gallery show at Gallery 1988. And so we were like, well, would you have time to just do a few more pencil sketches? I think we had 3 of his that we were going to use, and we needed 5. And so we commissioned 2 more. And so we definitely were inspired by Stephen King, who I love that he has illustrations in his book. They give you something to sort of like latch onto in a fun way. Yeah. So yeah, it was definitely very intentional. We didn't plan it from day one, like when we were first writing the book, but once it was written and we were sort of deciding like, okay, well now how do you present the book? And we were like, well, it would be great if we could get drawings. And if Stephen couldn't do it, then I don't know that we would have still done it. But we would, like, once he said yes, we were like, okay, great.
And also the first drawing you see in the book is actually, this was an idea we had like at the 11th hour. It's kind of a, it's like a blueprint of the house, like a kind of a real estate flyer. And this was, I remember I was kind of reading through the edit and I was messaging Peter and I was like, there's a lot of geography. I kind of wish there was a map in this thing, like in Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or something. And dawned on me in that moment, my wife is a production designer in film and literally can make blueprints. And so I just asked her, I said, will you make a kind of a blueprint of this fictional house? And she put that together. So that's her work there. And which I just think is like another, little fun thing. I think those little fun things go a long way to leave an impression. And then I do want to mention before we get off the subject, but Mark Schoenbach, who did the cover, he did an amazing job, like an incredible job with it. He'd also done the poster for Scare Package and Scare Package 2 and stuff, which are just phenomenal. He's done like a Halloween, a You're Next, like on and on. I think is it Sadist Art Design?
Sadist Art Designs on Instagram.
On Instagram, his work is incredible. He's just, and I remember Peter and I were looking at him because he especially does houses incredibly well, and we were like, oh well, this is because we had an idea of what we wanted for the cover, and so our hope is people judge our book by its cover. I think the cover tells you what you're gonna get, like in this book, and we're really lucky with all the art like that's on the book and in the book. And the really talented people we got to work with us on it. Oh, and fun story with the fireman, the design of him and the look of it and everything, it was an interest. Peter, you want to tell this story?
You go ahead. I don't.
Okay, yeah, you've told it before. Okay, you've told it before, so I'm stealing your story. But it was written as text, and then Steven Andrade did a pencil sketch of him with like the 13, and like there was a lot of elements of it that was Steven's work. And then Mark based his design of the fireman off of Steven's drawing, which is in the book. So it was like an interesting like baton pass from like the written word to one artist to another artist as it like kind of took more shape.
It's almost like Steven's sketches that were the fireman one was initially created for the pitch deck. Kind of function as concept art that Mark was then able to run with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you were saying that you hope that people judge your book by its cover, and I mean, I really feel like that expression, it applies to everything else in life. Don't judge a book by its cover, but I think that books you actually really do want to judge by their cover. And when they mentioned this on the Encyclopocalypse newsletter that I get, I saw that artwork and I was like, oh, I want to read this one. I want to interview these guys. Yeah. So I was all on board, and I also just liked the blurb too about it as well. But I really enjoyed the book, and I want people to go pick it up too, especially if they're around the age. We're all kind of around the same age, and then also if they enjoyed Scare Package like we did too. What do you guys have moving forward after this?
I mean, as of right now, nothing. We don't have anything to promote other than the book, because the book is was like the long gestating baby, and now it's out, and so it's kind of like, book, please read book. I mean, we have the documentary project that we were talking about. That's the sort of next thing that we are hoping to make. It's called Man Finds Tape, and we're hoping to make that in the spring. And we have other things that we definitely want to write next. We have two on the novel front. We have two ideas that we're currently kicking around now, and we'll sort of jump on whichever one we're feeling the most is kind of where we're going.
How long does it take you guys to write an actual project, like the screenplay itself, the original screenplay? How long did that take? Months or weeks?
So Dead Friends was longer than most. That was a complicated process. It went through a pretty good amount of drafts until we were ready to shove it out and start sending it to investors and whatnot. That one spanned at least a year. But then there are other projects that we've had that have come together in There was one called Killing It that we wrote, and I think like that was done in a few weeks. And
That was a feature.
And that was a feature.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it just varies. We outline heavily ahead of time, and so getting the story beats down, if we've done the blueprints correctly, then the screenplay is not too bad to do afterwards.
You know, as a Peter that is also a writer, I feel like I need a Paul as well, because it seems like you guys really work well together. I was going to ask you guys one last question too. When did you guys meet each other? How long have you known each other?
I think it was 2010, because I had met Emily Higgins and helped produce My Sucky Teen Romance, her third feature film. I think she was 17 at the time, and it was her third feature. And that was a lot of fun. And Peter came in post-production and helped with some producing. And then we kind of just realized our tastes aligned. And yeah, so we've been working together
12 years?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, 12 years, which is crazy. So yeah, and again, we produced a bunch of stuff for her, a feature, Halloween comedy called Grow Up Tony Phillips, like Cold Open from Scare Package. We produced some shorts with a great filmmaker named Will Goss. A lot of producing, but Seek, we did Seek, which was an awesome short film that kind of got swallowed in the 2020 South by. It was supposed to play 2020 South by Southwest, which obviously didn't happen. That's a great short we did. But yeah, so we've just been working together for a long time and writing for most of that.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, it's been a real pleasure talking with you gentlemen tonight. Do you want to just tell people like where they can find you, like on social media and stuff too?
Sure. So I'm just on Peter Hall Human on Twitter. And then Facebook and Instagram, I kind of just reserve for family stuff, so that's not worth checking out. But Peter Hall Human.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm just Paul_Gandersman on. No, yeah, that's what I am on Twitter. Yeah, just take my name, put an underscore between first and last, and that's me there. If Twitter still exists, if not, I'm on Instagram, Paul Gandersman without the underscore. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me tonight, guys. And if you want to come back on when you said it was Man Finds Tape is the potential next the documentary.
For now, that's what it's called. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you guys want to come back on for that, me and Danny would gladly have you on again.
I hope that there's a world in which it's made and we have a reason to talk about it. So yeah, we'd love to.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks so much. We'll see you guys then. Yeah.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you.